Guys, please support the podcast. In the description and in the pinned comment is the PayPal, the Cash App, the Buy Me a Coffee, the Locals, the Patreon, all ways to support the show. The show needs $5,000 a month. I'd rather get $1 from 5,000 people than $5,000 from YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble, which is what it's currently doing because those are weak spots and they have in the past completely stopped paying me and outright censored me. If you want something in return, Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, link in the description, 10% off. Sport Drink, link in the description, 10% off. And if you can't do any of that, please go to ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. Special Forces veterans since 1993 have been rescuing sex trafficked children once a month, 12 times a year since 1993. 100% success rate. And if you can't donate to that, there is a new website up from a fan of the show where you can donate frequent flyer miles to them, which reduces overhead costs, which allows them to do more operations. Thank you. And we are recording on Friday, April 3rd, 2026, with Colonel Watkins, Colonel Murray, General Blaine, and Supreme Allied Commander Ian Burlingame. And we just saw Blaine's little. I think my dog might have been even smaller with more fury. He was 17, a toy poodle, and his back legs were paralyzed since he was one. So he was in a
Oh,
diaper. So he had little man syndrome. Oh, and because he was
yeah.
paralyzed, we never got him neutered because it didn't work. But he still had all the testosterone. So he was short, had to wear a diaper his whole life, literally all day, every day, had his balls, was blind and deaf. And he was just,
Answers to the name of Blecky.
his name was Oscar, and he was so fucking angry at everyone. But I loved
Yeah.
it. That's why I bonded with him because
Ricochet Rabbit.
he was too stupid to know. He would start shit with Rottweilers. We'd go on the boardwalk in Ocean City, Maryland, and there'd be horses, and he would start growling at the horse. I'm like, dude, this thing's gonna
Yeah.
kick you 100 yards. But that's the energy I try to embody, just impotent rage. So
Yeah.
as always, Colonel Watkins, I'll have you start it, ladies first.
What are we talking about?
Fucking fine now.
So we went from impotent rage to the lady.
All right, we can go to you, Yam. I don't care.
So now
No,
she's
no,
got the
no.
talking stick.
If
You're holding the talking stick, you get to decide.
Yeah.
Provide Tommy with enough emotional support so he can make it through
So,
five.
Thank you. Say, Steve, fix your microphone again. Your microphone's always fucked.
I turned it down specifically for that.
Why? Why would you do that to me?
Impotent, get you into impotent rage.
That's it's exactly.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Counseling session wasn't quiet enough for Tommy. He was a quiet man.
Fuck you. Fuck you.
so if I'm going to start, I want to start with a comment about the recent arrest of the 20 people in France that was made up of the intelligence service, local businessmen,
Right.
local cops. It's basically the Gladio cell of Gladio cells. And if you were to go back in time to the 1980s and or 90s when they were rounding up the Gladio cells, that's exactly what they look like. And what were they accused of doing? Oh, assassinating people. And so I was reading through this, and it literally looks exactly like every other Gladio cell that was postured in Europe from back in the early 19 or late 1940s. So just want to make note of that was huge, and shows that they still exist.
Would you notice how they also labeled them as Masons and try to make it look like these were all secrets? This was a secret society problem.
Well, interestingly enough, they hide out in Masonic lodges.
Yeah, of course.
In Italy, the P2 lodge was where they had all of their meetings because it's a secret society within a secret society.
Yes.
It's not to be mistaken with actual Masonic lodges. These are very specific, and they embed themselves. It's like the Skull and Bones in Yale. Not
Yeah.
that we're going to make excuses for all of Yale, but they hide within very prominent organizations because it gives them a cloaking mechanism.
Yeah, and deflection. Yeah, this is the doctrinal line systems in my book, The Eternal War. They infiltrate. Isn't it interesting that the only real currency is still violence, still assassination and murder? The only way this whole illusion of a system works is people are getting murdered to
Yeah.
keep them in line, because you can't have, you can't have oligarchs defect. You can't have, bureaucrats, highly capable bureaucrats defect.
Well, they're
They
down
do
to
it all the
that because
time.
they're out of other tricks. That's why.
But wait, the big thing that I think Roxanne is bringing up, maybe I'm wrong, is they decided to catch these ones. And normally they let this shit pass at this level of power, at this level of, these rings are assassinating and disappearing people all the time. So the change for me is, oh, you've decided to bag these ones. Why? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, and the interesting to that point, I was talking about it yesterday. We don't know yet whether, because this has happened, it happened several times in Italy, where you will have one prosecutor and a group of cops that aren't in it, and they will stumble across one of the rings and they will start the prosecution, but they get a visit real quick. And that's what's going to be very determinant in this one is what's the disposition of it? Does it go all the way through the investigation? Because in Italy, before they acknowledged it in 1990, what would happen is the prosecutor gets assassinated.
Or the judge. Yeah.
Then the reporter gets assassinated if they continue to report on it after their visit. And so the disposition of this is going to be very, very important to watch how this play out, because it happened often enough for enough people to start questioning whether or not this secret organization existed in Italy, because of the follow-on murders of anybody that was picked up by an unsuspecting cop. And so it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out, because they would stumble across the rings and they would arrest the right people, but then the case fell apart either because the judge, the prosecutor, or the cop, the witnesses, they all disappear. And so it's going to be extremely interesting to see how this plays out.
We need to, so there was that judge in New Mexico who resigned because he had a gangbanger living in his house.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think that he willingly had that gangbanger living in his house? See, we need to understand, in a rules, in a legalistic society, the high ground is the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
And these aren't generally your war fighters. These are generally people who went into the law. They might or might not have been actually very good attorneys. In fact, the ability to fight, linguistically, legally, meanness, et cetera, fight. And so they go into in judgeships. These aren't necessarily fighters. They're easy to manipulate and control. They're easy to threaten and intimidate. And didn't we have another judge shot her husband and son shot in their doorway?
Right.
So the thought that our judiciary and our judicial system is not under this same kind of duress is a ludicrous thought for us, because the cartels, and they're the devil's legions, they work for the Praetorians, have vast amounts of money and vast amounts of access. And wouldn't they put, these types of Gladio-like assets in or near pretty much every judge that has any say over anything anywhere, including DAs
absolutely.
and prosecutors, et cetera?
Yeah.
It's what I would do. It's what we do as Green Berets in other countries. We go for the judges. We go for.
It's very obvious down here that's taken place. Very obvious, just by the rulings, and it's not just the judiciary. It goes all the way up to the AG. There's wide belief here that the AG, the governor, and the Secretary of State were installed by the cartels.
Yes.
And now, if the cartels are de facto extension of the intelligence services, then you can make the leap there that's who's running the show. And I make that leap anyway, just because I have a deep psychotic hatred of the CIA. So that to me is, they go hand in hand. And
well, you had
obvious.
Brian Kemp, CaneCon just, Brian Lupo was revealed that Brian Kemp appointed the 3 attorneys that were in a position to do something about the Georgia election of 2020. In order to get them to shut up, Brian Kemp appointed all 3 of them to judgeships.
Shocking, I tell you.
Well, what do you do to somebody who's not controllable? You put them in the system so you can keep your thumb on them. That's exactly what he
You
did.
make them independent. So people talk about compromise. That's 1 to 3% at max. Most people are compromised by the job position they're given, the recognition they're given, the influence and power they're given in a community. That's how most are compromised. Funding for their research, funding for whatever. That's by far the biggest number, and they're the hardest because how do you go after them? But on their part, for their part, everything they're doing is legitimate and legal. But the people who put them there's that quid pro quo, right?
Yeah, you have to cut off the funding, all of it, which is why all of this entire system, whether it's the 17th Amendment, all of the 16th, all of it, it has to go back to the way it was. We cannot be paying individual taxation. The state has to do it. It has to be based on the census. You cannot be electing the senators, which is supposed to be the state guard at the federal level. All of that shit has to go away, or we
Completely
will
agree.
never be a republic again.
Well, and 16th and 17th Amendments are fraudulently done. This is middle of the night type shit, not ratified properly. Just another big scam of the 1913 fracas following the beautiful seagoing voyage of the Titanic, a 3-hour tour. The other thing that is interesting to me is back to this hit squad in Europe having a light shined on them for some purpose. We've got a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit that was unsealed here in the United States this week, which is showing former special forces of a group called Spear Operations Group being accused of some pretty heavy shit
Down in
in
San
the
Diego.
in the assassination category. And I guess with me, these are two separate and distinct puzzle pieces. They're in the box. Do they fit in any way, shape, or form to what's going on? Don't know, but it's a global network, and these kids are being accused of murder for hire on a global basis. And so, don't know. Is there an intention to shine a spotlight on trigger pullers right now? Looks
So
like
they don't appear to be separate puzzle pieces. If I was putting the puzzle together, I would say they're edge pieces and they're right next to each other.
They're adjacent. Yeah. So
Yeah.
again, I did a video on it too, but the only real currency is not gold, not silver, not crypto, not fiat. The only real currency is murder.
Yeah.
It's always been the only real currency. Everything else is dependent on it. And so, Roxanne, to what you're saying, you got to cut off the money. Well, okay, what's the real money? The real money is murder. So what do you have to be able to do? You have to be able, the best you're able, when you're trying to root this out, prevent these types of murders. At least the murders of the key leaders who are trying to, key individuals who are trying to make the transition to something, back to a decentralized, balanced system, right? Like the founders tried to create. But all other currencies, whatever we use as a medium exchange or store of value, is really still dependent upon murder. And then it's a matter of how judiciously do we use murder and how carefully can we protect against it. And we forget this, right? We've somehow lost this thought, and just that because some of us here in this call are old enough to remember the violence in our own countries and streets in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the 60s. I was way too young then. But the 70s, I do remember, right? And my mother remembers the 60s quite well. 50s in Europe, right? The stuff was going on there too. So point being is just in the last 30, 40 years since I blamed the TV show Friends and Sex in the City. Those two shows just took us down a whole different path about surreality. But point being is this. In our lifetimes, we have forgotten how prevalent murder and violence is in society and how it's used to control. But in the United States in the 1970s, and I think later into the mid 80s, although it was tapering off, because again, what they do in law enforcement, like in New York, et cetera, law enforcement was just killing people here in the United States back in the 70s, the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And historically, Will Tanner talks about this. Historically, Europe killed 1 to 3% of its population per year to keep all this under control. killed them, right? Incarcerating doesn't work. But
a big
again,
number.
it's a big number, but it's roughly what's necessary. So again, this entire artificial financialist system is built on murder.
Yeah.
And the only way we can put all kinds of checks and balances, restore constitutionality, actually, Roxanne, to what you articulated and Blaine, you supported. We can restore constitutionality. We can plug some gaps. But if we don't accept the fact that all of it is predicated on either the ability to commit murder or the ability to prevent murder, at least enough murders, we're going to fall right back into it within years.
So I view the puzzle pieces as, or the actions to highlight those things as preventative in nature to try to head off some future action. But I guess the question I would have out of those things is what does this tell us about what track we're on in the near term, in the future, if we're doing that? That's where I'm at with these things is, okay, I get it. I understand it, completely absorbing it. But I'm going to overlay it with things like Europe and America are about to get a divorce. We're doing some very interesting things in the Middle East. The private credit bank crisis is about to go supernova. We have Mitch Wexler's property tax theft well underway, and that's going to be a very big deal. And here comes California refinery-induced food supply chain pressures. And so when you see hit teams highlighted, it's, I think, to neuter them. So then what does this tell us about what is coming down the pike?
Well, if you're going to take aggressive action, to Ian's point of prevention, limit their ability to affect murders, the very first conversation you have to have is that they exist. And that's, I think, what just happened in spades, both in Europe. Because again, you guys know I have been talking about this now for 3.5 years. And I've been talking into a void. These things exist. They've existed since the 1940s. And every single algorithm suppresses the revelation that they exist. They still exist. And finally, I saw this as like the dawn, just the sun peeked up a little bit, shine a little bit of light on here. I think there's going to be much more, because the only way that America is going to have the backbone and the ability to have what it takes, to Ian's point, about getting rid of this, is to actually know it exists.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And to understand that it's behind a lot of things that we see, that a lot of the people that are involved in things maybe don't want to be doing these things. They're not morally in accord with them, but they are under it's what I've been writing about, not for 3 years like you, Roxanne, but 2 years, about the Praetorian problem. It's very real. These Praetorian guards are everywhere, and they were everywhere in the Roman Empire, and they didn't just murder emperors on demand. They murdered generals, judges, leading industrialists, merchants, nobles, etc. The real power in the world has been and will always be the ability to commit murder where and when you want, or the ability on the other side to prevent that. And that's, this is also why homogenous communities are so important. Why smaller decentralized communities are so important. We all know each other.
And when someone comes in from outside.
Correct. Or we know that there's a substantive change in the mood among some people within our group.
Mm-hmm.
This is why they're flooding all of our communities. This is why they're making everybody so mobile. It's why periodically California does an intentional, California makes it intentionally impossible to live in California as a common average person, because then California and New York are rotating out their populations.
Destabilization,
right? But the only counter to this, power through murder has always been tight, cohesive communities.
Yep. And that's why they call you either a racist. And that's the whole point, is that it's not exclusive of other nationalities.
No.
Everybody is forms close networks in it, but they've sabotaged all of that with the racist comments and the religious comments and stuff like that to scare people away from doing exactly that, which is the most innate survival instinct that we have as a people, is to know your neighbor and communicate and establish those friendships. But that's the worst thing for overlords.
How do you then take these two, timeless things, small communities that everyone knows each other, as well as the I guess the meta consciousness of it, as well as murder being the only currency. How do we take those, or can you, and how do you still have a modern world? Like, there's a lot of good things about those small things, and it's that simple, but there's also awesome shit like air travel and the internet. And how do you merge? How do you bridge the gap?
Yeah, but all that came from small communities. We got to understand this forced, urbanization, this force, everything's actually been collapsing under the, the time of urbanized life. It was actually, we were able to do these things like go to the moon and put people on the moon when we were living decentralized, when we were smaller communities, when we hadn't centralized power, when we weren't as mobile and people grew up in the same small town and knew each other for generations. We did all of these things. We accomplished all things.
Yeah.
Virtually every major breakthrough. So, I'm an electrical engineer and computational engineer, doctoral level. There is not a single breakthrough in fundamental science or technology that wasn't accomplished. It's from the late 1800s into the 1960s. Even in technology, straight up technology. We haven't invented anything. We haven't created anything. We haven't made any fundamental breakthroughs in over 60 years.
We've actually covered up many breakthroughs. We have hampered and put some in the dustbin. Cures for cancer.
Yeah, Air Force
kinds
types
of
would
crap.
know.
Yeah,
Air Force people.
You mean the ones that haven't been abducted yet?
Well, I've had this conversation with a lot of guys that I work with over the years, right? And it's like this concept that we have to capture different technology in order to perfect it. That's not true. We had some of the best scientists in the world that figured this stuff out back in the 60s and early 70s before they put the lid on it. I mean, we had some very, very talented people working on some of these problems.
We still do. So let's talk In-Q-Tel. Let's touch on that one, right? Mm-hmm. So D and I don't know if this is true or not. I haven't been able to independently confirm, but I suspect it is. Okay, so In-Q-Tel was spun out of the CIA, and In-Q-Tel is secretly, along with another quasi-private government funding, which I can't remember the name of because I keep changing it, but $30 billion fund. In-Q-Tel was specifically stood up as an investor to be able to look at all of the innovative technologies and innovative solutions that were being put out there. And In-Q-Tel, and again, this other entity, are secretly behind most of the VC funds and many of the angel and seed investors. And that's so that the U.S. government, and particularly the CIA, could get early access to what technologically is being developed out there. The second piece of that on the VC side was also to be able to look at what high net worth individuals were investing in. So all of that information through In-Q-Tel, which is, actually In-Q-Tel was never meant to turn a profit. It turned fairly big profit, and that shocked a bunch of people, right? And I know one of the co-founders of In-Q-Tel personally. Give me a second. The whole purpose of In-Q-Tel, Steve, to what you're articulating, and Blaine, what you said, was specifically to be able to seek out early through hey, we're investors and we've got money for you and we'll invest in things that others won't because, we're the government, kind of the government. But it was the ability to look at things very early that might be a threat and either shut them down, or individuals that might have an innovation, very serious innovation, but weren't going to play ball, and just make sure that they get shut down and then their intellectual property gets stolen in various ways. And then on the other side, on the whole VC industry was specifically set up and backed by In-Q-Tel and related specifically to look at what are high net worth individuals investing in and how do we make sure that we don't get some rich people putting some money in some stuff that might bring this all down. So moving this to D&I and out of the CIA is a very, very interesting thing because, Blaine, to what you articulated, we might find that there are a whole lot of technical capabilities that we have that have not come to market or come to light because they've been suppressed on purpose.
Right. That's right.
So-
and honestly, there is, I've told you, EM, around me in my area, we literally have some of the greatest talent underground developing science in the quantum realm, quantum physics realm, and they're doing amazing things. But I can't tell you how many scientists in the build of my own technology company, my startup, that I've come across that are absolutely terrified for their lives.
Yeah.
Based on some of the cutting edge stuff that they're working on. They're very smart to have those fears, I think.
Yeah.
I think that the move of In-Q-Tel to the DNI is the reason why Tulsi Gabbard is under such fire.
Oh, yeah.
Totally agree.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing to do with Joe Kent. Nothing to do with
Nothing. But to illustrate just how important this is, when you understand the real background of the CIA, not what people think it is, and you understand that the lead time for this technology, by the time people even knows it exists, it's existed for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the ability of them to use that technology for very nefarious things is critical. And the other point, because obviously from a military background, the military in many ways have been subordinated to the CIA because of this ability of them to capture this technology, or not even to make sure that it doesn't exist. And so they are literally controlling so much of the battlefield, where if you're going to have a director of intelligence that is going to be superior in that to the CIA, DIA, NSA, and all of those, and be able to filter which technology needs to be explored and funded by who and for what purpose, it makes literally no sense for that to reside internal to the CIA, especially given their history and the nefarious shit that they've done.
Well, then how would you get all the money laundering done?
Well, how do you create massive, billion-dollar tech unicorns unless you control everything?
Yeah, and it's all.
And don't forget, they buried a lot of technology in Atomic Energy Commission and DOE.
Oh yeah.
To keep it away from the military.
Accomplices.
Yeah, and the labs. Don't forget the labs. Sandia, Lawrence Livermore. They buried a lot of tech there.
That's why having it at the DNI is critical.
Yeah,
and I think that's like their number one fear.
So they always put a general out in front of these things for window dressing. Typically the general has no frickin' clue what's going on behind the door of where the general's the director of one of these little gems like Sandia or the others. And that's why when I think about the missing 2-star General McCaslin, first off, I don't think he was abducted at all. I think he abducted himself, and I think he's taken himself off grid.
Well, his wife said that on a recording. Did you listen to her?
Yeah, I did hear that.
Who was John?
I agree with that too.
It was John Galt thing, but if you peek behind the door and you learn what the little elves are doing, you suddenly understand that you're now endangered by the types of kids that were exposed in that federal lawsuit in San Diego. And so, but these things are all in such a tight timeline piece that we're seeing this right now. So that's where I get back to the puzzle going, these things interlock. We're just about to be hammered with some sort of fake alien invasion or some bunch of bullshit.
I'm glad you brought that up, General, because I talked about this last week, right? Everybody thought I was nuts. Well, you can make the case for it. Anyway, the point is that
at this point, if you're not nuts, you're not trying.
I watch these narratives develop, and this week, watching Matt Getz say that and I'm not making this up, we're breeding humans with captured aliens to create alien hybrids. Literally said that on film. I'm like,
I think he meant
okay, either I haven't had enough,
not-
I haven't had enough crack this week, or the lewds I took haven't kicked in yet. But did I just hear that correctly?
Yeah, I don't think he meant space aliens. I think he meant illegal aliens.
I'm like, is the dude on a bad acid trip, or what's the deal? Did he have too much cocaine in Vegas?
Compare it to what Tim Burchett said, and he's a pretty damn credible boy. I liked him.
He said it was that April's Fool's joke.
Well,
That's nice. So nice. And April Fool's is such a great day to get your shit out there, back away from it, and then it ended up being completely real.
Yeah.
Let you see, it's got legs. I want to, if I might, related to all this, right? Remember, Eisenhower had 2 warnings. One was the military-industrial complex. The other one was the intelligence, science, and academia complex.
Yeah.
And that was the one he was the most concerned with.
Technocratic elite.
Techno elite, and that it actually gets to I think, Steve, you mentioned about the suppression of all the things that were coming out of the atomic energy, out of the atomic research in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah, I'll say it this way. To the general's point, I know that we have tech that's been suppressed because I've seen some of it, and it was years ago, and it was light years ahead of where we are, and it wasn't operational at the time. But I'm sure it's operational now. I'm sure it's been perfected. And
they went down using Susskind and others. They went down a whole different pathway of physics altogether. String theory, investing hundreds of billions of dollars in string theory research and PhDs, and ruining 3 generations of physicists with the made-up frickin' science, made-up physics, specifically so that people, we wouldn't have these innovations that started, that really were launched by the Manhattan Project in and around it. Right, particularly like free energy. Right.
Yep.
If we had spent a infinitesimal fraction of what we put into the whole green renewable energies into nuclear, we'd have infinitely powered cell phones that were ludicrously secure because you only need tiny pieces of uranium to do it, or even depleted uranium, etc.
Well, that's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
You think that's why what we're seeing? I think didn't Skunkworks come out like 2 weeks ago, and they're like, we're working on small, compact desktop fusion. Is that horseshit, or is that them rolling this out because they've mastered zero?
They've probably got it already perfected, right?
Well, they've mastered 0 point, and now cold fusion's.
We don't. Cold fusion doesn't make sense.
Well, that hot
remember
whatever,
WikiLeaks?
Fusion.
Remember
whatever.
WikiLeaks, right? Remember that the reason why Julian Assange is so hated is because he released all the emails between Podesta and Clinton that talked about free energy, talked about the UFO card, talked about
aliens in the observable universe. Yeah,
I remember that, right? Remember that stuff. This is Clinton talking about this. This is not us, conjecture. This is all an email, right? And that this Air Force general is in that pile of emails too, and he's in Epstein's emails as well. So you got to make the case. How much of Epstein is a construct and how much of it's real, I don't know. But if you take it at face value and you see the pattern in all of these disparate places, that's a pattern, right?
Yep.
So I don't know what that pattern leads to, but it does, they are developing the narrative, right? And in an influencing operation, you develop the narrative over time so people believe it and people buy into the narrative because they've heard it so much, et cetera, right?
And that's Hollywood backs them up. Hollywood rolls the movies in.
Well, that's when Steven Spielberg releases in June. Or
Obama
movie.
buys a movie called Civil War, and it's based here in Idaho. And awesome.
It is
I
Idaho.
got some breaking news. For everybody. President Trump just said you can drop the long knives on Tulsi. She's not going anywhere.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She is secure.
Yeah, but it's Friday. That means by Monday she could be out.
So that's true, but I'm just telling you about Friday.
So let's
Steve,
You never hit me with those negative ways, Moriarty. What's wrong with
we
you,
got
man?
like one little ray of sunshine, and Steve's like, "Fuck that."
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
He's Irish.
My little.
I am not
Easter egg
Irish.
is
I'm
being
Scottish.
Irish. Oh, even worse.
I take offense to those words because I'm
Even
offensive to
worse.
start with. Yeah.
You take offense.
let's as is, we're talking pieces, right? Let's put another piece in there and see where this one goes. Pam Bondi being relieved.
Yeah.
That's
Delicious.
not inconsequential. That's probably the biggest move of all.
Yep.
So what do
And
you all think of that?
she's going to a firm where she's going to be working the other side of this Epstein thing
Powerful
for a
law
whole
firm.
lot of money. Or a whole
Powerful
lot of
law
money.
firm. And here's
Yes.
my thought. My thought is she's going to that firm because there are a whole lot of people in the Epstein list that did nothing,
Right.
right? My
Mhm.
suspicion is she's going to and it is a very powerful law firm, it's a very prestigious position, and she's going there to protect the actual innocent. Now that's all going to get painted as, Trump and everybody's,
Sure.
going after. But as you and I, all of us know, right? Disinformation. How do you do that? You roll up documents and you put other documents in there, or you roll up a computer and you put other files in there, and then you put that onto some forensic system, right? Or some Intel analyst capability, and they find these documents or they find these files, right? So after a decade, Epstein's filled with that. Give me 1 second.
Well, it wasn't, yeah, and that's been my contention all along is that the Epstein file. We don't know how reliable those files are because they've had them in possession for a decade, and you don't know how many hands have been in there, how many different things have been. Because it's easy to spoof an email. It's easy to spoof.
Too easy.
Any
Files,
kind of
even you
communication.
can even put court records or court correspondence, and so. But the question becomes one of the gentleman who's replacing her, who is now the deputy AG.
Blanche, yeah.
Blanche?
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that he's kind of like Besant in that he's deeply knowledgeable of how the DOJ functionally works, like Besant is of Treasury.
Yeah.
And he might be and he's already been through confirmation, so we don't have to try and get somebody else through confirmation. This may have been the plan the whole time.
It could have been if Todd's open resistance to trying the previous wrongdoers, best way I could put it, from J6, COVID, criminals, all.
Yeah.
If that was by design for some future roundup, what I'm hearing from the ground is that, and I hope it's not true, is that there is a swimsuit competition, and the one who's in the lead to get that job right now is a move by Lee Zeldin.
Mm.
And Lee Zeldin is Mr. Chemtrail. And I really hope that it's not him. Now, it may not matter because get back to what Pam said about 3 months ago, if we prosecute all the Epstein files, then the entire government will be incapacitated. I think that's the right answer.
Yeah. Well, we all know also when you're running sources and you're trying to get a picture and you're trying to get after the key people, there are certain low-level folks or mid-level folks or close folks that as long as they take themselves off the board, will be able to maintain their ill-gotten gains and their reputation.
Right.
But you're going to give up the critical piece of information that we're missing, that we really need to move forward with the real nasties.
All of paperclip.
That's a little bit different. Paperclip was just literally about bringing fascism, Nazi fascism, straight into the U.S. and U.K. and Europe governments directly. But there were other operations, to your point, Tommy. There were other operations where there were individuals who weren't brought in through paperclip, who did have that type of information, who actually helped identify some of the people who should be on the paperclip list. And they were allowed. And this gets to, today, the German government is still paying the pensions of actual Nazis and Stasi because of this very thing. You're going to give us this information. You're out. You don't play in politics. You don't play in, influence operation. You don't do any of that. You have a good life. You'll keep your pension. You're fine. But you're also going to give us access. You're going to tell us the piece of information that we can't find in the files.
Right.
So,
well, that's all the ones that didn't go to NATO.
Yeah, right. Or our space program.
Like Blaine.
Yeah, that's me. That's how everybody. I used to tell people that as a 1-star, because all of the deputy representatives are 1-star and all of the representatives are 3-stars. And people would ask me to describe the structure at NATO, and I'd say, well, all I know is that 1-star is the last level before honesty breaks apart. After that, it's all fantasy island. But the ones we actually were still speaking truth to one another.
Well, somebody has to.
I could tell you that there was a moment when on an issue regarding the Russian frontier, as the Polish would tell you, the Spanish guy, because my representative was in there speaking the talking points from DC, as he's supposed to do. That's what you do. But the Spanish guy, the 1-star, blasts into my office and he goes, "Neither of you believe any of that shit that you just said in the North Atlantic Council." And I go, "Well, yeah, of course we don't believe that." It's like, "I just wanted to hear you say it." He said, "I'll see you for a beer on Friday." It's like, okay.
So let's back to Pam, right? Back to this change. One of the things that surprises me is how little states are moving on the Epstein stuff.
Right.
And I'm also very interested with Pam leaving now. And, so what is the thing that's really even more important, as the Epstein stuff is, and they're not unrelated? We have midterms coming up in months.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most critical election and not just the federal level, but, the down ballot as well. Probably the most consequential election in American history, which is interesting because the last 5 have been the same, but they're escalating.
It's Jumanji.
Severity.
It's Jumanji. We're in the new level.
Yeah, we haven't got to the final election boss yet, right? To use a video game, but one wonders. Yeah, one wonders why AGs aren't moving on the Epstein stuff, and one wonders if the Bondi move is related not just to Epstein, but actually maybe more to the elections, because have to focus on the 20, on November, right? We have to focus on November right now. Depending on what happens in November, then that sets up what comes after, and then you can go do all of these other things.
Well, let me give you one other piece for the box that may be very related to this. The president calling for a convention in the Republican Party in September. So this is a midterm convention. We don't have those. He didn't call it a rally. He didn't call it a pep rally. No rah, rah, rah. And he's asking the states to send delegates. Now, this is the hopeful Blaine Holt speaking, so I could be way off base here. But in my estimation, and I do think that this is the most consequential election, it could be the last one. If we have it. Have it. And what I think is you've got 3.5 months, mid-July pretty much, before everything shuts down because it's all about the midterms. In that 3.5 months of time, now that Pam is out, if there is to be a big roundup, if we are going to declare that this government is incapacitated because it's bought off, compromised, whatever the hell this situation is, if we do that, and it's local and state as well, then wouldn't you want a convention with delegates to impanel completely new elected officials that are appointed because the country is in some sort of emergency at that time? And again, this just theoretical on my part. There is absolutely no sourcing to back any of that up, but I find that the calling for a convention amidst all the other crap going on is certainly extremely interesting. And my opinion, if there's not a roundup, then the midterms really just don't matter. And it's just going to be pro forma on our way to the big impeachment.
Yeah.
And then we'll all be in a new place where it's going to be bacon, beans, and bullets in your state, and who's really in charge. We'll get back to the E.M. Burlingame violence theory.
I have to be devil's advocate in this because, I think a lot of this is going to bear out by June. And I mean, June's like the cutoff for the elections. That's like if something doesn't happen by
Okay,
then,
well, we
it's not
disagree
going
about the
to happen.
cutoff. I'm saying July 15th.
Okay, but I'll give you
Pistols
the
at
extra
dawn.
month. I'll give you
Pistols
the
at
extra
dawn.
month. Yeah, I'll give you the extra month. But you have to look at it face value too. Maybe Bondi left because she didn't get anything done prior to the election, and Trump wants, because one thing I keep hearing that I've heard from multiple sources, and one I can't corroborate, is that Trump wants retribution and accountability for what happened in 2020. He feels like he was completely robbed, and he wants to see people put in prison for it. And there was no action. And he finally said to Bondi, "You're done. We need to see action." And it goes back to what I said before about the American people need to see progress to come along for the journey. If there's really something going on, then you have to give them crumbs so that people will stay with you through the journey. You can't just wait for one decisive moment.
Stephen, just one little fly in the ointment, and you may be completely right, but one little fly in the ointment on that is, let's say she had done her job and with great zeal, she rounded up election frauds and all of that type stuff. Just the normal law system, the normal legal system would not have been compatible timeline-wise to get to the midterms.
Correct. Would have taken 3 years to even get any of that stuff to see the light of day. So if I might, Steve, to what you're articulating, there's one thing we need to be very careful when we're, doing our interrogator assessment of Trump. Trump is not petty. Vindictive.
I didn't say he was petty. I said he wants accountability. That's a much different conversation than.
Okay, but let's be careful there. Okay, when you are up against the most powerful, murderous people in the history of the world, like has been, we talked about earlier, you can't move in such direct, obvious ways, particularly when vast amount of the information space is all set against you. So I'm wondering, Bondi goes in and she learns an immense amount of stuff. Bondi was his attorney. She is very loyal, right? Trump isn't upset that he lost the 2020 election. He's upset that the American people lost the 2020 election and that everything that's happened since, not just to him, which he can handle, but to the American people. Bondi at DOJ had access to vast amounts of information. Now she can do things in the private sector in terms of making deals that she couldn't do because she would be, hands tied. But as a defense attorney now with a prestigious firm, there's all kinds of deals she can help facilitate and make that she couldn't while in uniform. And the only way in which we're going to have a legitimate election is a whole lot, not people get rolled up, et cetera, because that would just take us straight to chaos. And again, to what Blaine said, the way the legal system works, it would take 3 to 5 years for any of that shit to show up in light of day because the attorneys are going to delay, right? Now a whole bunch of things. The only way we're going to have a semblance of a real election is a whole lot of deals are going to be made between now and June, July, whatever one of you guys are right on the timeline. And really it'll be happening right all the way up till, September, November.
What's interesting about that is because of your comment about she knows what the government has.
Yes.
He is going to be the most sought after real person in the world.
Yes. Oh, in the world. Yeah. Outside of Russia and China. Yeah.
Yes. And so if you want to save your bacon, you are going to want to be where she is to be able to cut your best deal. And that's the information that she can get from the deal in order to get the real targets, which will never get a deal.
Correct.
And that's critical.
Yes.
Did anything ever come out like a month ago when Trump he's like, I have 17 pages about China's involvement with the 2020 election, and that was allegedly going to be, I don't know, justification for an executive order on voting. Did anything ever come of that? Was that horseshit?
Oh, he released executive order. He did that this week, right?
Yeah. It's China. Anything that comes up China is noise, or it's actually British Chinese.
Regardless, just as a token, did he?
Well, Well, the China thing is actually used to scare the living crap out of those that China has paid off here.
Yes.
So when you attack
Yes.
China or when you attack Iran, you got a whole lot of people in the swamp that are sitting there going, "Oh shit, I may be
Well,
in real trouble here."
And
Um,
China
well,
will off people too.
Yes,
People
it will.
that are ascribed to China,
Yeah.
right? But they're
Yeah.
not Chinese.
I know.
Chinese will take care of them for us.
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
So
No,
the
they've got.
Russians. Yeah,
does
So
Maduro
get
tie
back.
into this?
So if let's say EM has got it
Yeah.
exactly right, there'll be a bunch of deal cutting, and suddenly there'll be resignations out the wazoo for elected officials in Congress. Let's say that's the tack.
I don't think
we're
they'll
on.
resign. I think they'll stay there. But you're done.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Yeah.
But then wouldn't that make the build out of all those courtrooms and the cells at Gitmo just a feint to scare the living crap out of people?
Well,
Well, I
everything's.
think-
Mhm.
Because I think they're going to use them.
Well, but again, that's the difference between the smart ones that come forward first and makes that deal, and the ones that has enough of a pile that gets to go to Gitmo. So
Yeah.
it's going to be some of both. It depends on how smart you are and how fast you can run.
I think if you
I-
put 5 cubicle dwellers in Gitmo, you will light a fire in DC that will burn out of control.
Can we?
I just have to. I believe it when I see it. I'm just maybe I'm cynical, maybe I'm black-pilled, but I'll believe it when I see it. I've been hearing about Gitmo now for 6 years. I haven't seen any movement there. Maybe something is happening, but the leap between military and civilian law, there is a specific order and how that has to happen and what the crimes and misdemeanors are that drive you into that system. I'm just going to wait and see how it develops before I form an opinion.
Let's touch.
There's too many. There's too. There's so.
What's that?
Treason is on that list.
Treason is on that.
Treason's
list.
very
And
hard to prove the way it's currently written.
Yeah, well,
Very hard to prove.
tar and feather them. They're easier to pick out.
Yeah, I'd be good with that.
Okay, so Steve, let's touch on that. 3 generals relieved in the last 2 days.
That tells me that nobody wants to do a ground offensive. That's what that tells me.
I don't think that has anything at all to do with Iran. I don't think it has anything to do with the ground offensive with Iran at all. At all. Trump's not stupid. Hegseth, they're not stupid. They know that we are not putting boots on the ground in Iran. We're not putting, ground force. Now, we might do some small action here or there for whatever reason, et cetera, but we are not moving. This is about something else.
Yeah, I agree.
This is about something else. And this may be all tied back to your point, Steve, right? This may be tied to tribunals. This may be tied to the use of UCMJ and military facilities, et cetera.
Well, hey, if there's a time for a military coup, it is right now.
Yeah,
Literally right now.
So you call all the generals and all, this bloated, terribly sorry, Blaine, but we have
You're not hurting my feelings.
Right? We have 180 some odd freaking general officers. We had
I had 650 on my bingo card that needed to be fired day one after the inauguration day. I had 1,300 SESs that needed to be fired. Now, this gets back to, well, then why didn't you? You knew that needed to happen, so you left them in place. Wait a minute. That's because you want to observe them. You want to watch who they talk to.
Yes.
You're going to take a look at who they interact with, how they interact, what they say. And I think you're seeing, full disclosure, I know Randy George very well. I think you're seeing early signs of now action, that we're moving out of the observation phase and we're going into an action phase.
No matter what else we do, you have to start with cleaning up the military.
Right.
Period.
No question about it. No question.
I don't disagree with that at all.
All those other things have to happen
for years.
Right.
But I don't think it's Iran related. I think it's actually the
Correct.
result of a year-long investigation and watching and knowing, because these relationships are going to cut back through Milley, through Lloyd Austin, and General McChrystal. They're going to go way back.
Oh, Mullen.
Because there is this. When we get back to Eisenhower's warning, it's this revolving door of SESs and general officers that propagate that. They actually make decisions on active duty or in active service that propagates their arrival at that board meeting for 400 large a year just to attend 3 meetings a year.
And who sits on the advisory board or the actual board of these murder for hire companies?
Exactly. That's right. Check.
Right? Who handles, why? Because you need to have this so we can do the contract process and et cetera. So where they're going in, and then another piece that just suspicion, right? What's going on with Cuba? Not just Gitmo, but what's going on with Cuba writ large?
Yeah.
Because Cuba's been used for money laundering. Cuba's been used for reputation laundering. Cuba's been used for relationship laundering for decades.
Yeah.
Right? So there's something bigger going on related to Cuba, related to all of those connections and everything. But for me, the tell that some things are happening is the 3 general officers that were just relieved. Now, I haven't seen anything about senior enlisted. That needs to happen as well.
Yes, it does.
Different process, of course. And then Bondi, there are major things happening right now that are not so obvious.
Let's throw a really dangerous puzzle piece into the box here.
Ooh.
Yes. Because we're going to go back, and I think it's related, and I think it interlocks with a lot of them, and I think every single one of you are going to disagree with me. So that's what makes it dangerous. But we got to go back to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Absolutely have to go back to Charlie Kirk's assassination. And as much as a lot of people revile Candace Owens, a lot of people revile Barton Coleman, Lionel at WABC 77, they are literally doing investigative work that others won't do, and they're bringing receipts and they're getting sources. And I know a lot of people aren't tracking or paying attention, but they're getting to a place where members of the government, to include Cash, can no longer ignore this. Can no longer ignore that their retail story was shit from the get-go, or that it involves not just one foreign power, but probably several. And there is a lot of reasons and a lot of money and a lot of intel service activity. But the last two episodes ago on Candace Owens, the links she drew with Fort Huachuca, an active naval force captain who has been paid millions of dollars by our government, allowed to have his own separate LLC that he has contracted with the government, always paid 200-something thousand a year, and then right bracketed before Charlie's death and after Charlie's death, $7 million to an active duty captain whose son was fingered as the very first suspect in this, and that Kash Patel said, "We've got our guy." And then an hour and a half later, we don't got our guy. That was the son of that captain with Utah connections, and another connection of starting that company, of a guy who ends up being an orderly in the hospital where Charlie was brought to. So the puzzle pieces that they're pulling together string through all of this, in my view.
So let me just add to his dangerous hypothesis. I'm not a follower of Candace's. When she said that she had proof that a French assassin had been assigned to her, we just talked at the beginning of this show about the French assassin squad, okay? So I said, when she said that, because everybody was like, oh my gosh, Miss Drama Queen. No, France has always had assassin teams.
Oh yeah, it's actually their Secret Service.
Whether or not they were assigned her, I don't know. But that is not outside the realm of possibilities. And you just found, what is right next to Arizona, San Diego? And you just revealed there's an entire company of assassins there as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think, again, if I'm building a puzzle, I'm putting these on the outside and
So go to the
putting them really
website.
close next to each other.
Go to the website of the security group that was his for personal protection that day. He had only worked with them twice, and look up those resumes.
I
Then you'll go,
have.
what were you thinking, brother? What were you thinking?
This is the reason why they don't want you to understand Operation Gladio, because if you understood it and you looked at that stuff, you would go, what were you thinking?
Well, he wasn't. So I want to touch on something here in support of what you guys are saying. And I don't know that the 3 general officers relieved are unrelated in one form or fashion. Now, maybe not directly, et cetera. But there are implications that there was U.S. military involvement in Kirk's death.
Yes.
Okay. My suspicion, because Joe Kent is saying 2 things. One is about Israel's disproportionate influence in our decision-making processes, but the other one is about Charlie Kirk's death.
Right.
I think the Charlie Kirk one is the message within the message.
Which isn't getting any traction at all. And to your point, let me just say, when I did the deep dive into the MLK assassination, not the actual assassination investigation, because it was a piece of shit, just like JFK's.
Yeah,
but if you go to the 1990s, where the family, the conspiracy case, which was proven as a conspiracy, in the transcripts, there were assassins from Fort Bragg brought in as the last resort. You're not getting out of town alive. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, when I researched, because my whole thing is, if you know that Gladio and how it operates in Europe, and you know that we have our own Gladio program because you had to have one in order to be a part of NATO, that drove me into looking at all of the assassinations and terror events in the United States. So then go dissect Waco. And on April 19th, there were 2 groups of snipers from Fort Hood present on scene. All of the military equipment that was brought in was from Fort Hood. Do you know who the commanding officer at Fort Hood during that time was? Wesley Clark.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Wesley Clark goes on to be the NATO commander. NATO runs all of NATO's secret armies.
Yes.
And he was the commander during Bosnia.
Yes.
So all of this is, to me, other puzzle pieces that go to the background of how the military and its vaulted status among American people are inserted into these operations, and all of that is covered up in the aftermath.
Right.
Yeah, I've been saying this for years. We did not defeat, well, actually a couple of decades, we did not defeat the Nazis in World War II. We beat the Germans. And the Nazis became NATO.
100%. And they were scattered all over the world. You found them in Japan, you found them in Korea, you found them in the Philippines, you found them all throughout South America. They were in Egypt. They were scattered to the winds in order to seed themselves and perpetuate what they had started.
They had in today's equivalent, somewhere between $7 and $10 trillion war chest that they had stolen, and they went global. The virus went global, and they just rebranded from Nazi to NATO.
Yep. They were scattered throughout the United States. They are literally everywhere.
Yes. This is the true face of our enemy. Right?
We're not going to weigh at it. I'll tell you one last thing that Candace brought out that I thought was pretty consequential as they try to sell you on Tyler Robinson being the patsy who killed Charlie. The FBI has now brought back a forensics test that they got rid of as not valid
Yes.
After JFK's murder, they said this way of checking ballistics is not valid after JFK's murder. They're going back to that now to get it into the courtroom to say, no, this is actually valid and this is the way we're going to check the ballistics. And then their story doesn't even add up because on the day that Charlie was murdered, they're like, oh, well, we got the bullet. Because the bullet, the 30-06, was lodged in Charlie's, and they said, well, he had really strong bones, so it stopped the bullet. And now they're down to, well, we have a fragment. We're going to use this test. So
Yeah, the gun
they've
guy's
gone
not
from
gonna say
Colonel
anything,
Mustard
General.
with the pipe wrench in the conservatory to Mrs. Plum in the library with the revolver.
Yeah.
Is what they've done.
The gun guy's not going to comment on this because it's BS.
It's BS because I don't think he was
the-
even shot with a bullet.
Of course, the gun guy did just comment, but
That's plausible
played.
deniability.
well played.
Yeah.
No, I think
Well done. Well done.
I think that there are much deeper, much more powerful things happening than we're seeing. The role of a peace. I do agree with what some other folks said, or maybe you all said at some point, but I believe that while Iran is clearing out some Devil's Legion's assets and doing what we can to help the Iranian people, the Persians stand on their own. Hence, we haven't taken out the president or his cabinet, etc. And we're, bankrupting Europe and the UK at this point and breaking all those dependencies. I still honestly believe Iran is a theater. It's sideshow. It's distraction. It's deflection to keep us, commentators and thinkers and analysts from really looking at some of these pieces that we're kind of,
Yes.
as Roxanne says, putting on the outside of the puzzle on the table.
Is Joe Kent theater?
No, I think Joe Kent is straight up signal. Bondi, I think actual Bondi, her removal to go to this other firm is signal. See,
And
one
one
thing
of the-
about, yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
One of the fallout will be the destruction of NATO.
Yes. Yes. Well, the Nazis. We are finally working to destroy the Nazis, not the Germans. And we're working extraordinarily hard so that we don't become the Germans to the Nazis and then go destroy ourselves in some global conflagration.
Which is very dicey as far as,
Yeah.
that is and that's what my feeling has been all along, is doing this without destroying ourselves.
Well, think of it this way.
You brought that up in one of our first shows. You're like, how do you remove this evil without,
killing
igniting
those.
and then just becoming it again? And then it's like, well, then what was it all for?
It's like killing parasites without the toxic waste killing the host.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So, what we have to think of conceptually here about the Nazis is that, we all think about the Italian mob, right? La Cosa Nostra, that, how capable and embedded the Italian mob is. Now imagine German efficiency mafia, because that's what the Nazis are.
Well, so let's go there.
Right, emotional regulation and efficiency, right?
Roxanne, what if so? It's a very smart enemy. What do you think the kids under the DCI are thinking as they start to see all this shit crumble around them? And then what could we say are likely actions of desperate enemies in that division? Do they flip, look for a deal, go get witness protection? Do they double down, find the Ministry of Dirty Tricks, and get active with their next big caper? Some terror event, something to distract the shit out of us, a UFO event, whatever it's going to end up being. What do they do?
I think all of the above, and it's going to be a percentage. There are going to be ones that have information, and this is a question I get all the time about the CIA. Is everybody bad? That isn't even really the question to me. You have, as we well know, having been in the military, the stovepipe where not everybody knows everything or even anything about what's going on. But that stops at some portion of the CIA, where the junior managers on up are all derived from the previous nefarious operations.
Nepotism. Yeah.
Yes. And so the understanding of what you're doing gets greater, obviously, the higher up you get, even in a stovepiped organization, because you can't not know certain things, right? Because of the outcomes of them.
Yeah.
Especially when you understand the intelligence. You're not dealing with normal people. You're dealing with people that were previous lawyers and bankers and stuff like that. These are not just your run-of-the-mill, GS7 people running around in that building. And so I think there's going to be some people that will take deals. I think there's going to be some people that have already jumped ship because every single time the pressure has been brought in the past, and I know everybody hates Jimmy Carter, but when he conducted his midnight massacre of the 800 plus covert operators and fired them all, they didn't go away.
No.
They just went into an
Private sector
organization that was proprietary of the CIA and hung out and orchestrated the sabotage of the rest of Jimmy Carter. And I'm not a Carter fan, don't get me wrong, but his presidency was sabotaged from that day forward until the arrival of their savior, Vice President Bush and Ronald Reagan, who obviously they tried to take out right away to give Bush the presidency.
Yep.
But Bush was instrumental in creating things like the Safari Club over in Kenya for them all to hang out on so they could continue their mission. And so you're going to have some people in every one of those job jars that you just described, Blaine. And there's no way for us to know how many's in each one of them, but every single one of them will come into play.
Yeah. So Blaine and Roxanne, to your point, and Tommy, thanks for bringing it back, right? These are parasites.
Correct.
These are viral-like parasites. You can map their behaviors to different types of viruses. They don't ultimately want to kill the host. Now, some do, right? Some are just virulent and they don't care, right? But for the greater part, the ones that rise up to any level of substantive leadership, they don't actually want to kill the host. And they'll allow themselves to go into remission for a while, right? Or to be suppressed by the immune system. And the smart ones will even help the immune system. They will even augment the immune system to take out some of the, because the truly virulent ones are out of control. But it is exactly like any viral load that a human being or any animal picks up. That virus never is gone. You never fully get rid of that virus. It's just your immune system learns how to deal with it. And then depending on different times, how healthy the host is, that virus can flare up again. So this is, again, the book, The Eternal War, and the resentfuls and how they function and think and operate. And, to think that these people are crazy or insane, well, yeah, the really bad ones are. But the ones that sustain and endure, they're very sane, very rational, very logical, very intelligent. They're just wired different. Their orientation is they lack one thing, and the thing that they lack is humanist morality.
They have no soul. They have no soul.
Correct.
You cannot read a single book about Alan Dulles and mistake for having a soul.
Yes.
He's soulless.
Human morality.
I think he was a transdimensional alien hybrid.
The first one. The Dulles brothers were the first ones.
Mm-hmm. Reptilians with Nephilim blood.
I didn't know you could get pregnant from alien anal probing.
I didn't either.
Now it puts all that in context.
Yeah, they're Nephilim reptilians, which is a whole different animal.
Oh my gosh, that's so gross.
I respect that.
Here's one question.
I respect that as a conspiracy head.
Yeah. So here's one thing I really want. Here's how I know things get really bad. It's not going to be the faking of the aliens, etc. They're going to find Jimmy Hoffa. Most people are not old enough to really understand.
They're going to break out some of the concrete at Giant Stadium, and they're going to find him.
That's the great mystery of when I was younger, right? That was, where's Jimmy Hoffa? That was all over. But what was you?
Well, we have it again. Where's General McCaslin?
Where's General McCaslin?
So that's exactly where my mind just went. Is if you had to have somebody safe,
yes,
that when they pull their alien bullshit,
And they will.
Wait, you
And
got to
they
say that
will.
right. You got to say that right. When they pull their alien bullshit.
that you had to have someone safe that could dispel all of that garbage, he would have been high on that list.
You would
And
need a
let-
team, not just one person. You'd
Oh,
have to
yeah,
have
yeah,
a
yeah.
team with different expertises. Yeah, terribly sorry. Yeah.
But the fascinating thing to me is that simultaneously with this book that I'm doing, Safe for Democracy, it runs along the same lines of another project that I was doing on the U2 and the history of the U2, which most people don't realize how early the U2 started and what its capabilities were initially.
Cool airplane.
And that one of the phenomenons in the middle 50s, which was around the time when UFOs first started being reported, was that the U2 accounted for over 50% of the unidentified flying objects, and they had an office at Wright Pat, which eventually goes into the Air Force Research Lab, which is where he was assigned much later, obviously. But that's the repository for that type of information. And then, you go and research Operation Mogul, which was the weather balloons that were going alongside the UFOs for radiation detection and disturbances, which is what was found at Roswell. And you just see all of these things going on with the top secret classified CIA programs being misrepresented as UFOs. And they actually fed into that because it added the security that they wanted because of it being misidentified. And they actually played into that. They played up the reports that it was some unidentified alien, whatever, because it provided them the extra security.
We're as confused as you guys. What the fuck is this?
Now I'll go back to something you said earlier. Hollywood played into that and the publishing industry because what blew up, Heinlein and the sci-fi and Dick, what's his name? Tom's favorite guy, HK.
And they had CIA agents out there writing scripts for it.
Correct. And all the aliens movies and all that stuff, right? The best sci-fi movie ever, though, is Flash Gordon. I'm just saying. I'm just putting that out there. Just putting that out there. So that was a good psyop. That was a good psyop. I like that one.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
Sure. Yeah. But no, very much to your point. Again, look, while all this was happening, all the UFO stuff, what was on TV? There was the Lost in Space TV show. There was all the sci-fi publications, etc., and that all kind of came quickly out of nowhere.
All on purpose.
All on purpose. Right.
And yeah, the same, right? The 1952 UFO spotting over DC. Yeah, I mean and what did Eisenhower say a couple of years later? Like, hey, there's this crazy technocratic elite type thing, and it's like, no, it's just saucers. And he's like, all right.
So
no, it was CIA.
So I have another question for you guys, because Blaine, you said you know the gentleman, and I don't want to cast aspersions on any of the GOs that were fired because I don't know them. Right.
Well, we can cast an aspersion on a couple.
Okay. Well,
say whatever you want. I don't care.
Just the same with Bondi, who is now not in, the DOJ anymore, and so not bound within the constraints of if a general officer is asked or pushed to resign and resigns, he's now no longer bound within certain things either. Now there's still NDAs and he's still under UCMJ and you know what I mean? So to think
more so than Bondi.
Correct.
He still has his commission.
Yeah, correct. Right. And still has his clearances and all of that, because we didn't hear anything about revoking clearances or any of that. Right. But there are things, were there a movement to happen? And because of the frickin' letters they write and they go on the news and all that you're out of uniform guys are just, there isn't any one of them trustworthy that's alive at this point.
Right.
You might get some guys out of uniform in one form or fashion that are going to be able to help you now that they're out of uniform. The same way with Bondi.
It's possible. In the particular case that we're looking at here, I wouldn't put a lot of stock on that. And one thing
Okay,
about general
okay.
officers is, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, this one's a former general officer. They'll introduce on TV that way." There's no such thing as a former general officer.
Yeah.
You're actually just changing your status. So,
Yeah.
retired general officer can be made an active general officer in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That's how you know you're in real trouble, because the general officer matters calls you up and says, "Hey, you're back on active duty." It's like, oh gosh, what time's the court martial? So but then
Kelly.
in other cases, like Maxwell Taylor in Vietnam, or in Dan Kane's position, they just go, okay, well, we're recategorizing you and you're back on active. So the limitations on being helpful or saying, hey, you're more of a free agent now, you can go this, that, or the other thing. I don't think there's a real advantage in doing that with the GO. Simply because of those statuses and stuff. I can see it with Pam because, but in the case of Randy's got a cooling off period. He can't go to any firm for 2 years.
2 years.
And so, I mean, I could be wrong, and maybe there's some special assignment, but in his case and knowing him, I would be skeptical that is the case.
Do we know who's replacing him? Yeah, terribly sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that's been nominated yet.
Besides that, there are enough, if you want to go down your avenue, there are good generals that are retired that can serve in that role.
Yeah.
They're already out there. And many of them have made themselves very known to the administration of I know several of them, what their expertise are and their ability to serve in that role if necessary. So I don't think that any of the people that would be serving in that capacity right now on active duty that is let go would necessarily be needed for that. Obviously, it's a possibility, but I just don't see that. They would actually have more credibility being on active duty in the fight that we're going to be getting into with the fielding of the people that have recently retired, and some within the last say 4 years that served in Trump's, was nominated by Trump into particular positions and got experience under him during his first term that could serve in those roles. So
that's right.
Two things come to mind. One, having hired 2 admirals straight out of the Navy some years ago, carefully, because there is a 2-year cooling off. And so, but there's ways to work around that, of course.
Without a waiver.
Always. Yeah, without a waiver.
Waiver for everything.
Waiver for everything. The longer somebody is out of uniform, the less influence they have within the military, just because of mentoring and relationships and the fact that favors that are owed and debts that are due have a diminishing time scale.
Depending on what role they're playing out of uniform.
Yeah, completely agree. The other thought that comes to mind is what Marshall did before World War II.
Oh, yes.
Right? Marshall removed, I think, with 800 officers of all
and
ranks.
150 generals.
And 150, So Marshall gutted the U.S. military just prior to World War II. And everybody thought he was absolutely insane.
Yep.
But what he was doing was making way for younger, more experienced, more knowledgeable. Well, the type of war that they were going into needed some of the younger guys because they had actually been down that pathway and not the late 1800s and World War I kind of warfare.
It was very selfless. He hired back or promoted careers of people that he absolutely personally could not stand.
Yeah.
But his attitude was, if I don't like MacArthur, well, then the Japanese are really going to hate him. And if I don't like Patton, well, then the Germans are really going to hate him. And that was kind of his attitude. And it was really a very selfless act. You comparing to today's politics in the general officer ranks, I just, very amazing leader.
It was not without its mistakes, though.
You're going to get some good, healthy cells when you're cutting out cancer, right?
Yeah.
But it was just an interesting thing. And I wonder, if we're going to see more of this, right? Because again, remember we had an all hands on deck just some months ago, right? Less than a year ago.
That's what
And
I was gonna ask. Was that
well, I think there were obviously conversations had between the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, and that leadership that we aren't privy to.
Oh yeah. I don't know what was said. I just know it wasn't just a pep talk. And the crap that was sold on the media was completely in error. There was a lot more that happened.
And so more than likely some of these people had receipts brought to them,
Very likely.
right? And then some of them decided, well, we don't believe, we still believe in the cause that we're a part of. And maybe these are the first casualties of that. What
Yeah.
I would suspect is we're going to see more.
Mm-hmm.
And it has fuck all to do with Iran.
Yeah.
And more to do with the network that they were
Correct.
mapping.
Correct.
earlier when I asked is Kent theater and you said it's all signal? I guess I should have clarified. It's not horseshit. Do you think that there's actually
No.
some tactical? And I just had him on here the other day.
Yeah. I messaged with him yesterday. Give me a second. I
Mhm.
wanted to let him get everybody else on, and then I'd wait. But I sent him a message, in support yesterday. He got back to me this morning. Give me a second. In amongst all of the theater and noise, there are still signals, because we are actually trying to accomplish this, rooting out of this NATO Nazi parasitic infection globally. Kent's signal, this firing of the generals is signal, right? Because again,
Yeah.
The world runs off murder. And you have to make sure that your people who are the most capable of murder are your people. And in this case, not so much loyal to the person, but they're loyal to the Constitution, to English civilization, which at its heart is individual sovereignty. Because you will not get the people behind you in this fight when you're going to have the people at all levels, because we got to root this out everywhere. It's right here in frickin' Idaho, right? Everywhere. Yep. It's there in Arizona. You still got it in Florida. I know you all doing good down there, but you still got it in Florida. You're going to have the people, and the people won't go for anything anymore except for some no shit restoration of individual sovereignty. And that also requires an economic financial reset. I know Tom goes on about things, and Tom's very brilliant, but I literally went to the store yesterday, and I don't buy fancy stuff. I bought 5 things. It was $73.
Yep.
Right?
Well,
and the American people
$50.
feel gaslit when they're told everything is great and the economy's kicking ass.
That's right.
Correct. And we're going to inflate away, and so we are very close to a revolution here. The only way we prevent that, and I don't know that we can at this point, is restoration of individual sovereignty. To do that, you have to have the military. And while Joe Kent was at the NCTC, he is still a military guy through and through.
Yeah.
Right? And the NCTC interfaces directly with the military.
Well, remember, Whitney Webb doesn't like the trajectory of the Joe Kent story.
Which tells me exactly the Joe signal, because Whitney is an operation.
You think the first time I heard her, I'm like, how did she know that? How would she know that?
Get access to
how
that?
the hell would she know that?
I know.
That's highly classified. What the hell?
Look into her family. She's not from a poor family.
There's some damn good books, though.
They are good books. Well, but that's what you do, right? You lay out the sins of the father because the father's dead.
Yeah.
And then that makes you a subject matter expert. Well, never mind. All that shit was given to you for a reason. Yeah.
Here's the answers to the test questions.
Now, remember, we only have one rule in this show. You can't be more bitter than I am. That's the only rule we have.
Can we renegotiate that?
No,
that is our canary.
You can hit the guardrails, but you can't be more bitter and black.
That is the canary. If we go past that, there's no oxygen in the cave. Steve's down there.
So I do want to say something about Whitney Webb.
Yeah.
So I had already read her book before I had started this Operation Gladio thing. Mm-hmm. And after I got my head wrapped around what Gladio was and how monstrous it was. I went back and pulled her 2 books off the shelf. And on my show, we went through both volumes because most of everything that she includes in those 2 volumes are parts. It's Operation Gladio from start to finish.
Yes.
She starts in post World War II and comes forward, obviously to Clinton and Epstein and those things. But the networks all are Gladio. The money.
And you're saying at 33 years of age, she couldn't get there?
What I'm saying is not just did she not recognize in all of the mountains of research she did, because her book is very well footnoted.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
Not one time. And she didn't do it by herself. She actually had researchers.
Yeah.
So none of those people ever came across a single corollary to Operation Gladio.
Now
None.
that's interesting.
No mention of it. As a matter of fact, she stayed so far away from Operation Gladio by name that when she brought it over to South America and all the Nazi connections and all of this operation with the drugs in Latin America, she went so far out of her way to name Operation Condor, Gladio's kissing cousin in South America, that she, in one area of the book, she said, yeah, this was called Condor, not to be associated with Operation Condor because it had nothing to do with it. And it was Operation Condor. So she did everything within her power to steer the people away from the actual Operation Gladio infrastructure to build towards a narrative. And so, again, kudos for doing all that research, however it was you did it. But there's an elephant sitting in the corner of the room that you completely ignored on purpose, because there's no way a professional researcher went through all of that time and did not see Operation Gladio.
That's how this game is played. That's how it's played, right?
Yes.
So give me 1 second. Annie Jacobson, I think is her name. She wrote.
That's right.
She wrote Operation Paperclip, Surprise, Kill, Vanish. People need to read them together because they're really one book, right? Just 2 different tellings of the same. And my mentor in Special Forces was his mentor is Billy Wall, by the way. So, and they might or might not have already been in Afghanistan when the horse soldiers arrived.
Right.
For more than a week. Annie Jacobs, what we are articulating, what we are talking about earlier in the conversation about, the only real currency being violence and murder. Annie Jacobson does a pretty, and we're talking about, NATO is really just the rebranding of the Nazis. Annie Jacobson does a fairly good job in those 2 books of touching on that without ever saying it directly.
Yeah. And I don't see how people who make their bread and butter as researchers, I mean, I'm not a researcher. I'm not a professional historian. I'm none of those things. And you can't research any of that and not come across Operation Gladio. You just can't.
You can't.
It's because you're an asset and you're purposely not bringing it up then. It's like,
Correct.
it's like when I have on all these doctors during COVID and they'd be like, yeah, there's this glaring thing. And, eventually Dr. Malone or McCullough would be like, because they're ignoring it intentionally.
Right.
Well, okay, there's one other operation that people don't ever talk about that coincided with Gladio, with Gladio, but with Paperclip. It was called Operation Sunrise.
I talk about it all the time.
Who was that?
Alan Dulles, General Lyman Lemonsker, and General Wolfe sitting at a table making a deal to turn over the Gladio and the Russian papers in exchange for the rat lines and protection and safe houses.
Well, and to bring General Galen in.
Galen
Reinhard.
worked. He was on the list of people that had to be saved.
Yep.
General Lyman Lemonsker was Eisenhower's chief logistician on the and this was before the end of the war.
Yes. General
Lyman Lemonsker is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that wrote Operation Northwood.
Yes.
Talked about using in America Cuban exiles in Gladio operations to kill Americans to justify a ground war in Cuba. And where did JFK move him? He was a commander of NATO.
Yeah.
He moved
That's
him to NATO, and Charles de Gaulle was they went through over 30 assassination attempts on Charles de Gaulle while Lyman Lemetsker, friend of the Nazis, was trying to assassinate de Gaulle.
Well, they tried to use the French Foreign Legion to do it.
Not just the Foreign Legion.
No, I know.
And the 11th Shock Group. Every piece of the Gladio apparatus in France was used to try to kill Charles de Gaulle. Charles de Gaulle calls Lyman Lemetsker into his office and says, "Get the hell out of France. You're leaving. You have a 6-month deadline." That's how they ended up in Belgium. And he was the commander of NATO when some people say 2 OAS assassins were flown into Dallas on the day before the assassination, and one of them was escorted to the border by a Dallas police officer that was a member of the 488th Military Intelligence Brigade. Over 50% of the Dallas police officers belong to the 488th Military Intelligence Reserve.
God. Oh, God. Oh,
yes.
God.
There's 2 French NATO assassins that were deployed to Dallas on the day JFK was assassinated. Charles de Gaulle was quoted as saying that the same people that tried to kill me killed JFK. Operation Sunrise in a nutshell.
Sunrise. Why do we know? We're all paying attention to paperclip. Sunrise was the more consequential operation.
The beginning of NATO. It was the beginning of Gladio. It was the beginning of all of this.
It took 2-star German intelligence officer, used him for wet works for some years with the Banderites, etc. And who's the head of MI6 right now? Granddaughter of.
Yes.
Right. And then took Galen and made him the head of German intelligence. So we took the guy from the Nazi position, and 6 years later, we put him right back in that position, actually in his boss's position.
And
now they have MI6.
That entire time, he was in that 6-year period, he was still in the Galen organization.
Yes.
The BND.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So let me just tell you one more.
Yeah.
Mr. Special Operator.
Oh, here it comes.
This was one of the most fascinating finds, that in the immediate aftermath of World War II, there was a highly classified entity set up that derived people out of the Army CIC, and it was called Detachment A. Detachment A worked directly with the Nazis. Otto Skorzeny was a trainer for them. Otto Skorzeny was Galen's right-hand man during World War II. He was moved to Spain and was a trainer for Operation Gladio generically through his Paladin company that he created. And Detachment A was charged with creating stay-behinds in the Soviet-occupied territory of Eastern Europe. And there's videos. Their program was so highly classified, it was not declassified until 2014, from 1945. That's how highly classified it was. Detachment A also had the job of Gladio is about caches of weapons buried all over. And they set up concertina wired temporary military camps all over Eastern Europe as part of the military denazification program, dug up all of the Nazi branded weapons and replaced them with Western weapons. And on their website, it's called detachmenta.org, they have videos of these camp cities, of them bringing the dirt, digging up all these weapons, replacing them with Western. They nicknamed them A-teams. And then once they were done in Europe, like the A-Team show of Hollywood.
Oh, I know.
They moved them to Vietnam. They operated in Vietnam. And that is where Special Forces gets the ODA label from, Operational Detachment Outlet. is from these very people that got their original training from Otto Skorzeny.
So I have in my life met several dead A guys.
Yes, I bet you have. And I had no idea about that back to that particular program.
Well, they had other missions as well.
Yeah.
Very substantive missions. The dead A guys in the Green Berets are a little bit like legends to us.
Yes. And if you go watch their videos on their website, it is literally the beginning of Operation. It is truly amazing.
The launching of it. You bring up another piece, Roxanne. There are weapons caches all over the world.
Somebody sent me an article yesterday of one down in the Everglades.
Yeah, so it would just surprise you, like even like under the gymnasium floor of a high school, or in an extra tank that was put in when a gas station was put in on the corner, or
it wouldn't surprise.
Yeah, why wouldn't there be? Why wouldn't there be? I was gonna say, back to what EM was saying about it being the only currency. Otto Skorzeny, didn't he eventually, after the war, didn't he do work for Mossad or whatever before Mossad?
He was hired for one job to get rid of the Nazi scientists in Egypt.
Yeah, he took him out in the woods and shot him. Yeah, and I think his quote was, "I'm retired, but when I kill, what is it? Like a smile crosses my mouth," and it's like, all right. I mean, but yeah,
he was
one currency.
He went to South America. He was a part of the operation in Katanga to murder Patrice Lumumba. He was a very good planner for assassin missions, and he was a very good assassin himself.
I mean, listen, the paraglider and flamethrower story it's not cool. I'm not, it's not cool.
Let me just tell you how funny that story is. The paragliding in to save Mussolini on the island off of the Italian coast, that hotel that he rescued Mussolini from is owned by the family of a friend of mine here in Lakeland.
Wow.
So he does, my husband has a 68 Camaro, and he also has old cars. And so they met, and we were talking with him about all that stuff. And my husband said something about my research, and I told him I'd been stationed in Italy, and he goes, "Oh yeah, my family owns and he named the island." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's where they did the Mussolini operation with Otto Skorzeny." And he looks at me and he goes, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the military. I'm doing all this research." And he goes, my family owns that hotel.
No, I'm not a researcher, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like just blown away.
So doesn't this take us back to the start of the conversation?
Do they offer the Mussolini experience where you can go like get rescued by some Nazi assassin, right? Yeah. I mean, I'd pay extra for that shit.
There is a plaque there. There is a plaque there. I don't know that they're going to have any paragliders come and pick you up, though.
Oh.
So doesn't this take us back to the start of this wonderful podcast where EM started out with violence as a currency all unto itself?
It's the only currency. Ultimately, it's all other currencies are derived from it.
I've lost track there, tough guy.
Put your Mauser down.
Yeah, that's it.
So Blaine, terribly sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were saying.
No, this is it. I think the conversation is great because it takes the historical strand to today, and that we're at a point of inflection. I think that the historical conversation proves that we are, in fact, at a point of inflection. Yeah. But the thing and the stakes, to me, from my viewpoint, is the entirety of the republic itself. Well, and how goes the next 6 months is how goes whatever happens in the elections is how goes this republic. And so I think the stakes are as important today as they were in 1775.
I think more important because and Roxanne proved this, in spades on one of my roundtables, that, we're dealing with a system that was created over 80 years ago, and it's a system. It is not a group of organized individuals. It's a system of manufacturing people to go into key positions. They're recruited, they're trained, and they're placed into positions over and over again. And it's a very incestuous system that's set up. And all of us realize you have to dismantle that system in order for us to get back to a real constitutional republic. And that's going to take even if we start today, it's going to take a decade to clean out the system and get rid of all the insurgents. And, the tell for me was last week when Robert Malone said, I'm out of the CDC. I've had enough. You can't reform it. These people really think that these vaccines are safe and effective. You can't talk them off the ledge. The whole system has been filled with insurgents that are sabotaging everything we're trying to do for the general public. I'm done. And that tells you how embedded the system is and how many true believers, right? There's two really dangerous people on this planet, and that's a born-again Christian that's got something to prove, and somebody that's a believer in a cause. Yeah, she's a born-again Christian. Yeah, good luck with that one. So
if Steve,
got some
very
choice
much
words for that one, but you know where I'm going, right?
Yeah, so very much, Steve, in support of what you're saying, right? This parasitic totalitarian system was launched in the 1600s as Westphalia in Europe, and then it took a civil war in the United Kingdom, what would become the United Kingdom, and then the Inglorious Revolution to embed it everywhere, and everything from the Napoleonic Wars, everything since has been an attempt to embed this everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And they got close after World War II, and really much closer once the Soviet Empire finally collapsed from all of these operations and things that have been being done there. But this is a 400-year-on project. And if you do the Strauss and Howe, saculums, this entire 80-year saculum has been a crisis saculum. We have been in nonstop conflict since World War II.
Correct.
Everywhere. We've been killing people, murdering people, cooing people. We've been in a state of war since 1939. So this entire saculum, this fifth in this 400-year cycle, has been a crisis saculum, and it doesn't wrap up till sometime in the next decade, maybe the end of the next decade, and things could get drug out, but things are accelerating. So while we need to undo what was put in place, 80, 70, 60 years ago and expanded since then, what we really have to do is look at this 400-year system, this financialist system, this inhuman financial system. And we have, because it's what supports and funds all of these operations, period. So we have to take a step back and go, what happened to us 400 years ago? The American colonials, with some of the English nobility and Scottish and Irish nobility, by the way, as assistance, and maybe even the help of King George III, tried to break this cycle. And the early American founding fathers tried to break this, this financialist system. Unfortunately, they had traitors within, and I know a lot of people are big fans of Hamilton. I'm still on the fence. I'm not sure Hamilton was a good guy at all. I think Aaron Burr was right in killing him. I think Aaron Burr knew exactly what he was doing. And that, of course, that story gets flipped too, right? 100%. So if we are going to make it through this, we have to not just look to how we've all been Nazified since World War II, but we have to, in the form of NATO and et cetera, what we have to look at is what happened to us 400 years ago such that we lost our sovereignty to bankers and financialist systems. Because again, if we get rid of these devil's legions, we still have the fundamental problem of their bosses stay in place, the owners stay in place.
Yeah, I think the whole thing has to come down.
Yeah, it does. What I think is also very important to start getting Americans to be educated on is that if we win here, oh my gosh, the prosperity will be unlike anything ever seen on this planet.
Yeah. And not just in the United States, but enough, all over. Yeah.
Right. But I don't think enough gets out to the American people about, here's the incentive. Instead, it's all about the fear part of this. This bad thing could happen. You're going to be in famine. You're going to not have gas. You're the CBDC. Here's your social credit score. But if we win here, freedom like no one's ever enjoyed on this planet, ever.
And I think more of that education needs to be into the population's hands going, I've had it. I want that prosperity world. I want that freedom. I want that sovereignty. So I guess my happy ass is going to be down there at the city council today.
Well, and that brings up the social responsibility part of it, right? Let's say all things being equal, that has to happen. The American public has to be educated. If you want to keep this, and you got to get involved, and you have to do at least, you have to do a joint tour in order to, progress your career, right? Why is it that most people, the only civic duty they're obligated to do is jury duty? Why aren't you obligated to hold a public position for at least 2 to 3 years, or a city position or a county position, right? Why do those have to be career positions? They shouldn't be. They should be rotational positions where people are obligated to go for 2 years. You're compensated for your work, but you have to go sacrifice in order to keep the republic stable, right? Part of the problem of the system we have now is you have all these career bureaucrats that have been, sitting in a position for 45 years. They have no allegiance to anything. The only thing they care
and they're
about
wealthy beyond their wildest dreams.
Yeah,
because they're selling out all their Americans.
Yes.
Go ahead and get the vaunted job of running a county's appraisal district and see how much you like the bucks that roll in for you.
Oh, and look at the BubbaCon that's come out of that, right? So you have all of these, like a case in point in Kitsap County. You have the county, the county clerks, the county recorders, and all the people doing the county regulations for, just say, septic tanks. Well, one of the septic companies, his buddy is in the county, so then all of a sudden, all of their approved septic plans that's the only approved plan there is for the entire county. That stuff has to stop, and the only way you stop it is you get the career bureaucrats out. You don't let them get a foothold so that they can taint the whole system.
Yeah.
So
on Monday, I'm talking with Mitch Vexler, who is one of the great Americans that we have, and he is making it his business to expose what the appraisers, the private equity banks, and the school districts have all colluded on to artificially pump the prices of real estate, get you a new tax rate, and take away your property from you completely.
Yep. All right, guys, I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to have to jump.
Me too.
I think
we're all in the same place.
That's it. We're out of here.
Ocean's
11.
I was about to end it. I was about to end it and say we're coming up on 2 hours. I've been thinking about what
I got a thing. Love you.
I'm trying to think of the thumbnail. I think it's going to be Steve Murray as the canary, as the bitter canary. I'm thinking about how to do
That's
it.
right.
Canary in a coal mine with your face on it.
I mean, you think I lost all this hair because I'm happy? Come on.
Hey, my Cavalier King Charles Spaniels are ready for the violence. I just want you to know that. They're ready.
We are so screwed.
We're everybody, guys, thank you for your time. Everybody watching, have a great weekend. Thank you so much, guys.